Hello. How you going? Hey. Hello. I don't know.
The most fabulous audience.
I know. I don't want to break it up. Everyone's having such a great time saying hello.
They can also hello afterwards. You're the one we've come to see.
Oh, right. Okay.
Just tell everybody to shut up.
All right. No, I can do that. Hey, Prem. Yeah, I can do that. Hey, oh, professional. What a delight. Thanks for up the mic, darling. No, so great. You got tickets all right? I was worried.
Yeah.
Sorry, right in your face here. You got tickets all right? Huh?
MATRIBO sorted it all out.
Right. Yeah. But everyone hasn't seen everyone in years, and it's really hard to start. And they're all chatting and talking. I'll get into it. Where are you sitting? Okay. Hey, hello. Yeah, bloody hell. Hey, hello. Hello. Seems criminal to stop all this. Everyone's having such a great time. Catching up.
Hi, welcome.
Welcome.
Byron's been waiting for you.
Yeah. Great. It's good to be here, really. Yeah. You like my uniform, do you? Cancer will do something for you. Yeah, thank you. See you later. Hey, Philly. How are you? Darling. Yeah. Great. Yeah, darling. How are you? All right. Are you ready? Okay. Okay. Hello. Wow. And up there, wow. Well, what can I say? I mean, my God, I feel a bit criminal even starting. I was just watching everybody buzzing and being together, and people are coming up to me saying, "Oh, it's amazing, Premda. I'm seeing people I haven't seen in such a long time. Thank you for bringing us all together." No. Yes, I accept the love. Thank you. No, I'm a black belt at deflecting love. Sidestep. But so, hit me. Before I really start warming up the room with all you guys, I would like just to make a little special request. Last year, exactly 1 year ago to the day today, August the 15th, was the last time I did my show. And I got so sick and all the rest of it, I couldn't do it since then. And it just turned out exactly on the same day. Amazing. Now, the first show last year that I had filmed, it was really for posterity, because I'm sure some of you know by the title, Dead Man Laughing. I've been given a terminal period of time. You know, I've got about another 6 months according to medical wisdom, okay? Who knows? I mean, you know, anyone here can slip down the stairs in an instant and bang, it's over. So why I did this was that I thought, well, my grandchildren in England may never see me, but at least I could have something for posterity, right? it'll be on YouTube forever, which is quite amazing. No, when you think about what the Egyptians had to do to be remembered, right? I mean, really, I mean, just now you can go, click, and you're immortal. It's unbelievable. So anyway, it was for their benefit that I wanted to have it on record so that they could say 15, 10 years from now, they could look at their granddad and say, well, Premda, yeah, that guy's my granddad. Okay, that's what he was. Okay. So that was where all this came from. But the point I'm trying to get to is this. Shock, horror. I'd done the show 10 times. The one time, Murphy's Law, I want the show filmed, about halfway through it, gob appeared. Spittle, I'll be polite. Spittle appeared in this corner, right? And nobody could see it on camera. Nobody saw it. But when I saw the DVD, a few days when it was fixed, I wanted to die with embarrassment. You can imagine, it was an absolute killer. Nothing had ever happened like that to me before. But sod's law, when I decide to get a professional film crew in to do it, that happens, right? But it got worse, because it's not spittle, it was gob. It was a piece of gob started there, and then it started there. And then I was doing this, and all I could see was this gob going up and down. Not my mouth, the gob. Gobular. Ah! So, why I'm asking you, if anybody here sees anything remotely like that, I want you, and this is the tech crew, the film crew, and everybody, and you up there in the green room, stop the show and say, Premda, you've got a lump of gob in the corner of your mouth. All right? Or it could be something a bit more vulgar, all right, in the nostrils. But no, I'm serious. I do not want that on record forever and ever, amen. All right? So if I can take that out of my game, there's something else you might need. I'm going to talk about it later, so I might as well talk about it now. My bladder is being completely fried with radiation, okay? So now I have to wear an external catheter bag, a suprapubic catheter. A tube goes in my belly and into this bag that I have around my waist. Now, I have to, Murphy's Law, because this has happened to me once before, you know, the bag or something starts to leak, right? And I sometimes am not aware of it because there's like a couple of layers under that. So if any of you happen to see, and even you guys up there, a map of Australia appearing, it's not special effects, all right? And I've got a spare valve. I don't need the NRMA. That's the nearest real man around. All right, I think I might begin. No, cheers.
gengo ba yom den goi jay nadir jeg azu maluzem yangongi Jindo day bong jay mi jay jam zay la Ningoy nam balu yang da gengo ba Yom den goy jay nadir jeg azu azu
Beginning, for me, is a very deeply mysterious thing. I cannot remember when I began. What I simply mean by that is, I can't remember, I was going to say when I was born, which is true, but what I understand about my beginning was given to me wholesale as a name and a date of birth. I was born on October the 19th in West London, 1952, 6 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. And that is my beginning. But it doesn't feel right because I can't remember beginning then. One of my earliest memories that I have, which was confirmed by my mother and sister, was when I was about 6 weeks old. And there I was, 6 weeks old, and it was just this one memory. It's not a continuous memory, just this one memory. It was bath night. My mother said to my sister, "You take him, and when I get into the bath, hand him to me." And then my sister took me and handed me to my mother, and then my sister got in. And my mother was holding me above the bath water like this. And as she lowered me down, the hot water, as it rose up and it came down past my kidneys, made me pee automatically, which made her laugh and my sister laugh and everybody laughed. And that was the memory I have of that. That's my earliest memory. But there's no blank, there's no blankness before that period, and then suddenly a memory of being 6 weeks old, and then there's this continuum. So for me, it was always, even something as simple as that, I realized I couldn't take for granted my own beginning. I mean, it begs the question, how can a 6-week-old baby understand English? And I understood English perfectly. After that, no, I'm pretty sure there were just snatches of words that floated around in the ether. So a friend of mine said, you know what it is? I think that we're born, we know everything, and then we have to learn how to be babies in order to fit in. Well, okay, maybe. She told me she could actually remember the day she was born. I'm speaking of Jan, my beloved. She actually remembers the time she was born in a hospital in Reading. As she came out, they'd swaddled her. She couldn't breathe, so she said, "I'm out of here." So she left the body and was looking down. And in the bed next to her mum was a Japanese lady, and she was speaking Japanese, and she knew it was Japanese. And then her sisters and brothers came in, and they went to the wrong bed, to the Japanese lady's bed, and she was saying, no, I'm next door, I'm there. So how do you explain that? And then just to finish that one off, fast forward 69 years, And her second husband, I'm her third husband, her second husband had some thing going on. He had to go into hospital. And she was in this room and she looked around and she said, "Excuse me, was this the maternity room that my husband is now in?" And the nurse said, "Yes, it is. This used to be the maternity." So she actually nailed it, 69 years later, nailed her time of birth and so on. But my memory is nowhere near that. But nevertheless, it gave me a healthy respect. I think a healthy respect about not knowing anything really. If I couldn't even work, even a simple thing like a beginning. It's a lie. It never ends, so how can it begin? I started life in this mortal coil in a council house, a 3 up and 2 down council house on the outskirts of West London. And there were 4 of us kids in one room. There was my mother and father in another room, and my grandfather was in the box room. He could come to live with us because my eldest sister, God bless her, she died at 15 very suddenly. I was 6 years old, and she was brought into hospital with a very high fever on the Friday, and on Saturday she died. My parents were absolutely devastated, their firstborn. It turned out to be osteomyelitis. Even if she'd survived, they would have had to amputate her leg. So it was quite tragic for the family. However, there I go. I was 6 years old. They all came back home, and I couldn't quite remember the series of events, but everyone was crying. Everybody was absolutely heartbroken, and I heard things like, she's gone to heaven, she's with Jesus, she's with the angels. And I was thinking, well, surely that's good. Why is everyone crying? If she scored the big one, right? If she's gone to heaven and she's with Jesus and God and everybody else, then surely, that's fantastic. That must be something to celebrate. All of which I kept to myself, Eventually my father, because they're all giants up here moving around and I'm down here. And eventually my father, because I said, "Oh, what about Derek? He doesn't understand." So my father knelt down in front of me like this, and he's looking at me, and his face, you must imagine, is like an IMAX screen, right? And he's holding me by the shoulders, and he's gently shaking me. He said, "Don't you understand? Don't you understand?" And I just smiled, and I was embarrassed. "She's gone to live with the angels. She's with Jesus. She's with God. She's going to be with them forever in heaven. Don't you understand?" And I was completely flummoxed by this. Totally and utterly flummoxed. I thought, why is everybody so depressed about such a happy occasion? I don't know. That was a weird one, because I don't know if that came back in the back door as a twisted sense of humour. I don't know. Maybe it did. Because after that, I remember being 7, 8 or 9, and these road safety ads would come on television, and they were very hokey, black and white. This is like 1958 or something, right? And you see this old boy coming out, and he's walking along the street, and a car would come along, and a newspaper caller on the other side of the road would be going, "Evening News and Standard, read all about it, Evening News and Standard." And the old boy would totally forget and just walk, and bang, the car would hit him, and he'd go, and they'd cut to, and then back to the motorist looking so shocked, and then just the legs poking out from underneath the car, and the headlight was all bashed in, smashed, So this would happen, and I would say, as the motorist, "You should look where you're going. Look at the damage that you've caused my car. Are you listening to me?" And I used to get hit. Bang, you're sick. They wanted to take me to a child psychiatrist for remarks like that. My brother was the only one, and he used to snigger and not be seen laughing. But yes, I used to cop all that. So anyway, that was fun. We moved out of the council house, and my parents scored a pub. That was their passion, to run a pub. And my father was made redundant from a job that he'd had for donkey's years and became a landlord. But because they were older people, the brewery gave him a really, really rough pub to run. It was like 400 years old, from the 1600s, old oak beams. So you can imagine what it was like moving from a council house on a council estate, which was very rough, to suddenly, it was a very rough pub, but we had all this freedom, you know, and my parents were so happy. My mother really loved the Queen, of course. She loves the Queen. And she also loves corgis, because the Queen has corgis. So she indulged. We could now do things like have pets and that. We had room. So she bought 2 young little corgis, a male and a female, and she was going to breed them and have puppies. And yeah, it was all very wonderful. And the boy was called Pepe, and the girl was called Sally. Now, the interesting thing was, as they were getting older, we always knew when Sally was coming on heat, because Pepe could only get up the stairs backwards. Sorry, am I falling over myself? Yeah, that's another one. I was thinking about this, what you wish for, right? I always wished that I'd have enough money to be comfortable until I died, right? Motherfucker, right? Yeah, I didn't get the money, but they shortened my life, right? So for the next 6 months, I'm rich! I've got so much money for the next 6 months. I mean, yeah, so be careful what you wish for. I always dreamed, like most men, of having one strapped to the side of my leg, right? So I thought the irony of it was when my genitals fried, and part of my genitals, my bladder, now appeared on my leg, and I had to got this thing, you know what I mean? I think, be careful what you wish for. You'll always get what you want, but never the way you expect it. That's true. You think about it. Yes. So that was where was I? Oh yes, the dogs, the corgis. Yes, they bred. We had little puppies running around, and that was great. I've never been able to die and melt with puppies and kittens and babies, even as a young child. I love them, really, but I can't do the big meltdown. And I'd watch people melt down as soon as a newborn baby appeared, or a puppy or a kitten. They go, oh, oh, and they all start breathing heavy. You know, really like the total climax when they get in. I don't know, I always felt like a bit of an outsider. But later on, and I used to cop a lot of shit for being that kind of cold-blooded, but I finally nailed it. And it took a while. I think I was probably in my 40s when I worked out what had been going on. I'm just going to get a bit of water, excuse me. And yeah, no, it was the dry mouth that got the gobby bits going. No, I'm serious. If I see any on there, mate. I know most of you. Now, what was I saying? The corgis, the dogs, right. Oh, yeah, no, I nailed it. It's a very important point, and I nearly forgot. And it's very simply this. I worked it out. What I reckon, all right, and I'm not going to get political, I'm not going to go into any of this stuff too much, but I just want to say this much. What I reckon one of the worst things that Western culture has ever inflicted upon the world is this, all right? That is, it has elevated base sentimentality to the state of love. And that was the instinctive thing I was always doing this to, you know? I couldn't help it. But of course, it would create reaction because I was in reaction. I hadn't worked out why I was behaving the way I was behaving, so I was just adding fuel to the flames. But I nailed it, and I thought, yes, that's what it was. And the unfortunate thing about it was because it was never recognised or acknowledged in me what was going on. I was just told to shut up. It just festered. And as it got worse, it would turn into cynicism and sarcasm and a sense of, detachment and being Joe Cool. And that was very much an establishment of an image outside of me, established inside of me, basically, that I started to use to deflect and keep the world away from me. Because what I hated about it was that wallowing, sick, sentimental sense. And yet it's the only thing that you could get in terms of love would be a variation on that. My mum and dad weren't bad people, believe me. My mother was amazing, the 3 jobs, dad got 3 jobs, working all hours at Godsends, been through 2 world wars and a depression. No, really, I know that if I was to prosecute my parents for being bad parents, I could prosecute and defend them equally. I really do. I reckon I could really argue both cases, why my parents were good and why my parents were bad. I reckon I could get every jury to be hung and they'd have to keep doing retrials. So that's fair enough. What could they do? I mean, really, given the lights that they were given, and I had a lot of anger and bitterness about them not loving me and my father being an arsehole and all of that. But come on, what was I doing, when I was, 20, and what was my father doing when he was 20, and what was my mother doing when she was 20? Never mind about my grandfather. I mean, I've lived the life of Riley compared to what my parents had to put up with. So, yeah, all right, that one, sentimentality. And in order to get out of that kind of straitjacket, which was very clever of me, I jumped out of that straitjacket into another one. A bigger straitjacket, but still another. And that was Her Majesty's Royal Navy. I joined the Royal Navy when I was 15 years old, all right? 15 years old. Can you imagine signing a 12-year contract when you're 15? No, I did. I mean, your parents countersign, but they were just glad to see the back of me in terms of, well, he'll be looked after in the Navy. It'll make a man of him, right? He'll be right, and he'll be 27 when he gets out. So, so that was me a done deal. Okay. So when I got in there, that really was like, wow, what is this place? Talk about Federico Fellini. Forget it. I mean, nowadays, where you have, you can Google anything. If you want to Google transvestites or queens or anything like that, you can just see them and, all the information that you ever wanted to know about them. But when I joined the Navy, those things were still pretty much in the closet, but not, of course, in the Royal Navy, So I remember this happened. No, there was a lot of gay guys in there. They would never put their hand up to it, most of them. They'd always, some of them had this rationale, right, that if they were the ones giving it and not receiving it, then they're not gay. You're gay if you're the receiver, but not if you're giving it. And I'm married and I got kids, so I should know. And they did. They got married and got kids. So it was trying to work out all this kind of social shifting values and norms, because most of them too, the older ones would be de facto male prostitutes. So very wealthy people would send their chauffeurs down to the dockyard gates and pick up these sailors, and they'd make a roaring fortune. So you can imagine being 16 years old, babes in the wood. I couldn't work out what is this. And not the pub. I mean, the pub was a pretty rough place. So I wasn't naive in that regards. I'd seen big people act like complete arseholes after that a few drinks. I mean, that was another eye-opener. In the 50s and 60s, I still treated older people, with that certain respect as elders. But you just see so many of them getting drunk and acting like kids. You can't believe it, And the fights, oh my God, and what they get into. These were adults, parents. Anyway, Her Majesty's Royal Navy. Well, make a man of you, right? My first experiences of acid, marijuana, speed, were in the Navy. The place was awash with drugs like that. And you go and watch and there'll be people tripping. Can you imagine? A life on the ocean wave. They've got the finger on the button and they're tripping. Look at that. That's the, yeah. So don't, when you sleep at night, you might think about that. I was initiated into acid when I was about 16. My mate Doug, who was a mentor, he was about 18, and he had a choice of going into the Royal Navy or Borstal. And so it was either 3 years in Borstal or 12 years in the Navy. Well, he picked the Navy. Anyway, so he turned me onto acid, and I didn't know anything about acid. Believe me, Timothy Leary and all this other stuff was totally alien to me. It was just like a little tiny micro something or other, and he bit some off and he gave me some, and so I took it and I couldn't feel much. And then I noticed I couldn't stop laughing, and he couldn't stop laughing. And we were in this pub, and now the pubs in seaports are very, very rough. I mean, spit and sawdust is complimentary, really. Rough places. And the guy behind the bar was a guy called Giovanni, who was a queen, an absolute queen. It's the first queen I'd ever seen. And he had this kind of see-through blouse on, tight black pants and Cuban-heeled boots, and he had blonde buff-back hair, and he'd just be mincing around all the time. And we three sailor boys were sitting there. This was a Saturday night. The place was going off, but he really took a shine to us. So every time the sailors came up for a round of drinks, they had to buy us a beer. And he'd say, "No, you're going to get a drink for me daughters, aren't you?" And he'd start pouring these drinks and putting them down in front of us. It was a real laugh. Anyway, you have to admit, I'm tripping, right? And then these squaddies come in, these army guys come in and start a fight. And I've never seen a transformation of a man just absolutely mincing around the whole time. "Hello, darling. Oh, if anyone's coming in here, they can go outside and do it. Oh, really? Hello," you know. Absolutely. Anyway, these guys started a fight. He changed. He just became like a cat. He leapt over the bar. He grabbed one, bang, and he smacked the other. And he had him out the pub, and he slammed the door. And he turned around and he said, "Sometimes I have to show them just how muscly I can be." And he came mincing back. And 2 drinks for me daughters. Yeah. No, it was an experience. I mean, I was in Madagascar, right? We'd been on Byron patrol, which means we came out of Singapore and we're on our way down, around the Cape back home. But before we can go home, there was a blockade that had been going on for years. It was totally Mickey Mouse. There was a Declaration of Independence by Smith in Rhodesia, and he'd broken away from the British Empire, so we were blockading the port so that they couldn't be supplied, which meant, instead of being at sea for a month, we were at sea for 3 months. We hate sea time. I mean, you live and die, you're like this, 250 guys in a small frigate, forget it. And you can imagine, I was 17, absolutely pumped, and you can imagine how horny everybody is, and how it all gets off. And because I was a bit of a pretty boy, I said to Doug, "Do you ever get bugged?" Obviously, they get pissed, they come back and they want to get into bed with you and all this kind of shit. I said, "What do you do?" He says, "It's easy." He says, "All you do is you get some lip balm, all right, and you put it around your ringer." And I said, "Hang on. You putting lip balm on my anus?" I said, "What good's that going to do?" He said, "Old son, it'll keep the chaps away." So there we are. And the other tip I got off an older sailor from Yorkshire, Yorkie Cockcroft you were. He said, "Listen, kid," he said, next time before you start throwing yourself, and throwing yourself means masturbating. I think that's a good image, isn't it? Throwing yourself. He said, before you start throwing yourself, throwing your sen, he says, lie on your arm until it goes dead, and you can't feel any bloody thing. He says, then when you throw yourself, it'll feel like somebody else. That's true. The lip balm one was a joke. This is true. I was told this. It's an art form. It's an absolute art form, masturbation. Yeah, it is in the Navy. God bless them. So we get into this port, Diego Suarez, it was, in Madagascar. And it was a French colony. And they're a lot less uptight than British colonies. You find the French sailors mix a lot with the locals and all that. And we went into this really rough place, mud brick sort of place, not like the British pubs, not much nicer. And it had lots of fishing bottles and that, but it's still rough as all buggery, but we're all in there, and the bar's kind of made up of milk crates and, planks that they've knocked together. But we could just all hang out. It was having a great time. Anyway, I fancied buying some ganja, right? So I said to the barman, I'd like to buy some smokes. And he thought I meant cigarettes. I said, no, ganja. And he said, oh, yeah. So he called over another young guy, and off we went, and we wound up in this shanty town. I need to drink. La Gobe. So we wound up in this real rat warren of a shanty town, and I found out after when I went back on board the ship, that in the area that I was in, the night before, a French legionnaire had been kidnapped by the local resistance and castrated. I don't know. I had no idea. There's no way I would have gone to a place like that. Anyway, when I get back to the bar, it had a big open area, courtyard out the back, and a big mud brick, dunny thing. And I thought, this is all right, I'll give some to Doug. Where's Doug? I said, Doug, do you know where Doug is? And he said, he's out back in the courtyard, in the dunny. He's getting a blowjob. I said, oh, okay, fine, all right. There were plenty of girls around, and, they were working girls, kind of. They weren't full-time prostitutes, but when ships came in and the bars and all were happening, the girls would come, and they were absolutely lovely women there in Madagascar, gorgeous. Anyway, so I went out to the courtyard, and a place where one was just sort of shoulder to shoulder, jostling around and all that, and I went and I said, Doug, are you in there? And he said, yeah. I said, come on, mate, come on, have you been in there? Nah, come on. So I was a bit, pissed and that. So I pulled the door open, right? And there, Doug had his back to me, and sure enough, I could see what was going on down there. And as I went in, down the left-hand side of where the mud brick was an electrical cable and an open switch, and I didn't know the cover was off it, right? So I go in, and I say, Doug, get out of there! And I wouldn't have pulled him out, I was just messing about, right? So I put my hand simultaneously on the light switch, and I pulled his shoulder, right? This is a true story. Before I go any further, this is a true story, really. So, bunged my hand like that, and I started to go like that, because the electricity, thank God it was 110, went through me like that, right? Well, you don't have to be a scientist to work out that it finds its shortest route to Earth, right? So I do this, and then Doug starts to go like this, and the poor girl underneath is going, ah! And she ran like a bat out of hell. Didn't see her for dust. That is a true story. That happened in Madagascar, 1970. It did. I managed to get chucked out of the Navy. I had a 12-year contract. It was like an ironclad straitjacket. There's no way. So I just spat, didn't I? You see that in the light? 12 years, an ironclad contract I signed. And it was very hard to get out. Guys were trying all sorts of things, there was one pretending you're gay. And I remember one of them went up to the medical officer and went in there and said, I want to be discharged. He says, why? He says, because I'm a homosexual. He says, in that case, give me a blowjob. Because that blew it. He said it blew it. Didn't blow it. He said he didn't want to do it. And so he didn't get chucked out. So anyway, trying all sorts of things. Now, I was very lucky. While I was in there, I was on watch. It was on that frigate that we were doing the patrol with a killick, a corporal. It was a very lovely guy, a Scouser, Mickey Mouser from Liverpool. And he was a Marxist, an absolute dyed-in-the-wall red Marxist, but an intellectual, as much as we could get on the lower deck, he was. And he was intelligent. He didn't, he wasn't proselytizing it. So when I was on watch with him, because I loved the sound of my own voice and I loved to argue, I would get stuck into him. But after about 3 weeks, he began to win the arguments, each and every one that I was putting up to him. And so almost overnight, it took a few weeks, but I became a Marxist. And when I did, it just illuminated my interior. Now, that was the first time anything like that had happened to me. Sure, the acid had done it, but in a completely uneducated way that I would never have understood. But with Marxism, I could actually feel it. Like, I could feel my conditioning when he was explaining to me how the system conditions you and you're a product of your environment and so on. I then began to really embody it. And for the first time in my life, it gave me a sidestep to myself. So it could have happened with Christianity. Maybe if the guy had been a really great Christian and had spoken to me, the same light would have gone on when I would have seen the light and embraced the love of Jesus. So I want to try and make that, I think that's exactly what happened. I was actually having what could really be called a religious experience. But the religion that I was falling in love with was purely secular. But it resonated in me, and it later on, as I got into sannyas, it was that same area within me was being stimulated. So I became a communist, and I put in a request for a discharge on the grounds of being a communist. I was a liability. No, they're onto that. No, there's no way. But I thought, why not? I'll give it a go. I tried to get chucked out for being a drug addict. That didn't work. I took a whole bunch of amphetamines and I went into the medical officer and said, I'm a drug addict. This was in Singapore. And they put me in a mental hospital for 3 weeks. I was only meant to be there for a week, but the guy who does the test, the biologist guy, he was on holiday. So I wound up there 3 weeks with 3 mad Gurkhas. That was an experience. Young guys, but mad as hatters they were, Gurkhas. I used to sleep with one eye open. But they never bothered me, thank God. Yeah, so anyway, I submitted that request, thinking it would fall flat on its face. But then the divine intervened. I was hitchhiking home to my weekend leave, and this Triumph Stag sports car pulled up, and inside was a very well-dressed man. I thought he might be gay, because I had my sailor's hat on my bag. I wasn't in uniform, but it's a great way of getting lifts, right? So I jump in, and it turns out that he's a commander of this destroyer that's tied up alongside. I was on the Ark Royal, this aircraft carrier, and they were tied up alongside us. And of course he puts the radio on, and it goes on about Northern Ireland, right? And he was saying how I'm bloody unchristian. Well, that's all I needed, right? So I started to talk about British imperialism, and anyway, he reported me. Unbeknownst to me, he reported me, and the requests for discharge and his security report came to Admiralty at the same time. And bang, I was out, 4.5 years. I was out. I was free. Yeah, no, tremendous. Unbelievable. I came out of there floating. When I was there, I'd picked up, I'd got all sorts of girlfriends and relationships. I've always been madly falling in love with women at the drop of a hat. That's always been one of my big things, right? I'm pretty good with it now, but then it was just like a drug. I'd fall in love and I'd be completely stoned in love with this girl. So that happened to me in Singapore. I fell madly in love with a Chinese girl, and we got married, lived in England for a while, for 2 years. it was while I was in that marriage that I was discharged from the Navy, and there I was with a wife and a kid. I was 19 years old, and not a happy bunny. And I then, quite by accident, got a job in a psychiatric hospital as a student nurse, which was quite the last thing I ever expected I would be doing, because I'd come out the Navy with West Ham United and, a game of darts and a ploughman's lunch. But the Marxist thing, I didn't realise, kind of made me middle class without me even realising it. Somebody pointed that out to me, and I found it very embarrassing, that to be a Marxist, you have to be middle class. It's true. It is. Marxism is a middle class trip. It's got nothing to do with the workers. Yeah. Anyway, they don't want to fucking know. All they want is West Ham United and a game of darts. They don't want to know. That's fair enough. So, yeah. Where was I? Chucked out. A nurse, that's right. So, the person who worked for my father as a part-time barman was a nurse, full-time nurse, up at the local hospital. And he suggested that I come, because I couldn't find a job, and give them a go, this local country hospital. And I thought, well, the ancillary staff. And he said, no. He said, why don't you try out and be a nurse? And I thought, really? So I went along, and they were really desperate. And I did the IQ test, and I bombed on the maths, and I did very well on the English, apparently. But I could talk to people. I've been brought up gregariously in pubs and in the Navy, so I could talk to people. So they took a shine to me, and I got the job. And that was such an explosion, because for the first time in my life, I was meeting middle-class kids who'd been educated at university. So when I came out with my Marxist, orange boxing and get up on it and started proselytising, they could shoot me down. I mean, they'd read all those books, they'd been in those sorts of things themselves, and some of them, in fact, were quite left-wing, but they weren't intimidated. And I was very humbled by that in the end. I had to sort of listen. And then I started to hear about R.D. Laing, and all this started to shift me again. I could see that mental illness and the capitalist system and the way things happen were all bound together. And so from that point, I began to shift again. And this time, it was to more, I would say, a spiritual centre that I wasn't aware of at the time. I wanted really desperately to work with young schizophrenics. And they had a unit, but I realised to do that, I was like 22 years old. I was in my second year, and I realised that I had to find out more about myself. So you couldn't do that through the system, so I went outside the system to a growth centre. And they were mushrooming all over Europe, these growth centres in the 1970s, the mid to late 1970s, there were lots of them. And I went along to what was a 48-hour marathon. All right, that was my first ever group. Don't ask me why I chose that to be my first ever group. I think I was drawn to the intensity, and that it was the big wallop. I'd get this big bang, for 48 hours. But now, also what I see drew me to that group was the photograph of the group leader. And it was a man called Varesh, who's just died recently. I was 22 and he was 37. And so I paid my money, which was a lot in those days. It was over a week's wages, I remember. It was a lot of money. And off I went to London, all by myself, to this big area in North London, big red brick Victorian buildings, like three stories in a basement. And this group was occurring in the basement. So I went down the stairs and they were playing this music, Barry White, you're my first, you're my last, you're my everything, and there were these 6 Germans who'd come over from Cologne who were quite young. I guess they're about 18 or 19. Like I said, I was 22. And they were full of energy, jumping and dancing around. And I'd never really been that close to people who were that open. And what I didn't realise, that, what I'd actually formulated quite expertly in concert with others was an image of myself, which was a Marxist, Joe Cool, bits of Georgie Best, John Lennon. They were all kind of mixed in together how I wanted the world to see me, this patchwork quilt, right? But I didn't know it was an image. I thought that was me. I really thought that was me. So when I went into this 48-hour marathon, they were not in the least bit interested in my image or what I felt I was. They were very confronting, very full on. Defense mechanisms were not accepted. All right, you couldn't say, oh well, I think I would be better off if I was seeing you rather differently than I see you now. I think that you are a splendid fellow, and they say, bullshit, bullshit. That's what you think. Tell us what you feel, you know. And of course, I couldn't. I really couldn't, because I could not feel. But I had no idea I couldn't feel until I was in this situation with these people. But the strange thing was, these 6 Germans were very bright and bubbly and open, and they had strong eye contact. And I would find that it would make me squirm. And I wasn't aware that I was feeling uncomfortable by being looked at so directly and so strongly. I felt I was being attacked. Now, this is crazy, right? These guys were just open and loving, but my experience of it was that I was being attacked. And I would constantly find myself in that state of avoidance. To be under this microscope was too much. And then everyone else arrived, and then late, because he was always late. Varesh. Varesh came, he had this afro hair, and he had a big moustache, and he looked just like Jimi Hendrix. So I was drawn to him. He was a very magnetic guy. But he also reminded me of Mickey Mouse, that look, and Che Guevara. It really was, for me, a blend, you know, of Jimi Hendrix, Mickey Mouse, and Che Guevara. Yeah. So I felt that marathon was like Saul on the road to Damascus. I was not the same person after that. I'd completely became somebody else. But I just want to give you an idea of the kind of thing that I walked into, right? Because I was used to Freudian analytical groups where people sit in chairs and you talk about your feelings, but you never have them, right? You can talk about your feelings all day so long as you don't have them. Because if you have them, you'll get medicated. That's the way that it was. And that's the way that it was. Yeah. You're encouraged to express your feelings, but just don't have them. Okay. So, what was different about this, of course, was it was all experiential. Experiential, right? If it was anger, then it would have to be expressed. They weren't going to give you any theories about it. They want you to come out with it, which I couldn't do, right? Now, before I go into that, they opened the group with something called dynamic meditation. Now, some of you I know are very familiar with it, and some of you would not know what it is, but I would like to give you just a quick demo. I'm not going to do 40 minutes. I couldn't. I honestly couldn't now. I tried to get some pump happening, and I can't. I'm not in my 20s now, and my body's not so strong, but I would like to anyway give you an idea, right, of what it was like. You know what's coming. Nothing there, is there? Right. So they said, find a space, stand with your feet shoulder distance apart, and you're going to put a blindfold on when we tell you to. And there are 4 stages to the meditation. Each stage is 10 minutes. First stage, 10 minutes chaotic breathing. Second stage, catharsis, which means you throw out all your madness, everything you can. If you haven't got anything, just invent it. It doesn't matter. Cathart. That were the instructions. The third stage was jumping, landing on your feet and shouting the sound "who," right? So, can you imagine? I had nothing to hang that on. What? Whoa! And they said, all right, stand up. They're about to start the meditation. And I'm frozen. I'm absolutely frozen. And before, before he gave a demonstration, this guy. He said, all right, the first stage, 10 minutes fast breathing. Goes. And it went like that, right? But it went like that for 10 minutes, right? 10 minutes, right? And then, after that, you go straight into catharsis. So it's like, and so on, right? And then the third stage is who? Jumping up and down and going, who. Well, I couldn't do any of that. I mean, no, I couldn't. The first stage, I'm looking under my blindfold and I'm going, seeing who else is doing what, you know, through here. And the group leaders are walking around screaming at you, let go, lose control. Let go, lose control. Okay. So I'm doing this. I'm really getting lightheaded. Better slow down. A bit more. And the who was kind of, who. And the catharsis, well, I just stood there. I couldn't cathar, I just stood there. Anyway, when the group got going, right? What began to, well, for a start, they were incredibly insightful. They had us dancing just to music, Barry White. And at the end of the songs, they sat us down and it just went zap, 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 just by the way we were dancing. So, you know, women would be dancing like this, right? And the women, the group leaders, would be saying, you're a prick teaser. And the girls say, why? Well, how can he get his cock in when you're doing that? And it's true, right? And if you see the catwalk models, right, it's like this. You know, they move their hips from side to side. It's a very negative, it sounds like a come on, but it isn't. It's teasing, quite literally. So they were, or, you know, somebody might be dancing like this, you know, more like that. And they would say, just so you see what's going on. Yeah? And they say, oh, you're frightened of intimacy. I say, why? Well, because you keep your genitals way back. You won't allow your genitals to be part of you. You're dancing like this. Because you won't do that, right? That's what came later. From that, you know, when I was having sex, right, it would be, and that was it. The woman would jump off, look at me and say, well, is that it? Is that it? Well, I've had farts that have lasted longer. Yeah, so what was good, which was able to connect with this energy of mine, was some guy, it was me, sorry, I was trying to get into my anger with this other guy, right? And he couldn't either. And we obviously didn't like each other, so Varesh wanted us to bring that out. So I'm going, you, I don't like you. You pissed me off. You really pissed me off, you know. And he was doing the same back to me. And Varesh stopped me and he said, listen, if you want to know how to relate, you're going to have to do it on an emotional level. He said, what I want you to do, he said, I want you to act that you want to rip his jugular out with your teeth. Now, this was the first time I'd been spoken to like that, right? I want you to be that angry that you're going to rip this guy's jugular out with your teeth. because it was amazing. When he said it, I felt a whole sense of relief, because I'd always felt those things, but I'd never been able to put a word to them because it was so unacceptable. So yeah, it was like, oh, okay. Anyway, right, all right. Yeah, I think I can do a bit of that. And with practice, I got very good at it. That group, it was very tender and very, very loving and very kind and compassionate. I mean, I'm just telling you all the fireworks because that's the sort of things that you remember. But it was an amazing healing. And I cried for the first time since I was 13 years old. I'd let the roller doors come down. It was being really feeling harassed and not being able to do my homework. And it just, I don't know, it just got to me. And I'd changed schools a few times because my parents had moved to different pubs. And it was just hopeless, and I wasn't an academic. And I was just crying and crying, and I hated myself for crying, for being such a fucking wimp and crying about, school things, But that was a thing too. I mean, that tenderness in me, which I buried quite effectively, could be very much summed up in that song, Puff the Magic Dragon. I mean, I totally relate to being Puff the Magic Dragon. And as a young child, yes, I did have that Jackie Paper who used to come and visit me and give me sealing wax and paper and other crazy stuff. But of course, one night it happened. Jackie Paper came no more, and Puff ceased his great roar and withdrew into his cave. And I'd be sobbing as a child when I heard that song, Peter, Paul and Mary. And it was so embarrassing. I mean, it can still get to me now. I later on found out that it actually started life as a poem. It was never meant to be a kid's song. It was a poem about the loss of innocence. But one of the band read the poem and thought, oh, that'd be a great song. And it became a popular kid's song. But it can still get under my guard even now, that song. So all that tenderness, where I'd abandoned the dragon and left him in the cave, I mean, much to my cost, because you can't get rid of a dragon. You get rid of those feelings, you try and hide them, but they come back and they'll bite you in the arse every time. And coming to that group was, again, on the deepest levels, it was about finding that magical child, that dragon, and reconnecting with that. And I hadn't cried. As I said, at the age of 13, I was so sick of it. I remember saying, I'm sick of this, and a voice said, I can take that away from you. And I said, yes. And it was literally, I could feel these roller doors just coming down as I was cutting myself off from myself. But it felt very liberating. That was the horrible thing about it. It felt great. It felt like I didn't have emotional diarrhea. That's what it felt like. I would no longer have to cry, and so I didn't until this marathon. And it was quite a way into it. I was quite resistant. But when I finally did break down and cry, I wasn't being confronted. It was a time when the lights were off, and all these images came of my dead sister, which I completely blocked out, because she, in fact, obviously would have been a surrogate mum to me, being the eldest daughter when I was a young baby. Obviously, she would have been taking care of me quite a lot. So this all came back, and it was amazing. I came out of there feeling like I could never, ever be the same person again, and I wasn't. I did lots and lots of groups. I loved it, couldn't get enough. And I was blessed. I was fortunate enough to work with Varesh closely and became friends with him in that period for about 5 years. And in that time, I became a sannyasin. And that, of course, was also a big game changer. But I was still a Marxist. No, really, I was. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but I was. And I met 2 or 3 others in sannyasins. A Chinese bloke, I remember, absolutely into Mao Zedong. And a Dutch friend I had too was a big Maoist. Well, and I mean, even I heard Osho was a socialist when he was 17, so I don't know. It gets around. Yes, sannyas. So did tons of groups, took sannyas, and then the big day came, like to go to Pune. I received this letter saying, beloved Premda, love, your feeling letter reached him, his blessings. The suggestion is that you come to Pune on March the 21st. And I would always take things like that at those times, like the 10 Commandments. So I said, right, I'm going. And my girlfriend, we just hurriedly got it together. And I arrived in the ashram, I think 1976, on Enlightenment Day. So this was March the 21st. So the place was going off. I was too late for discourse. And I was very, very worried about meeting and seeing Osho for the first time, because I thought, if he doesn't do it for me, what have I done? Because like I said, I still had a lot of fingers in the Marxist pies, and I wasn't about to pull them out. So it was going to be what they call kirtan. At the place called Chunk de Zoo, you don't actually talk to him, but the musicians are all there, and he sits in a chair, and the crowd, and everyone's cheering and going off and clapping, and the music's great, and everyone's jumping and dancing, and you just file past, and you bow down, in front of his chair where he's sitting, and then out you go. Well, I'd had a lot of trepidations about bowing down before anybody and calling somebody my master and all of this, So I really didn't know. However, when I turned the corner of Chunk de Zoo and I saw him for the first time, it was one of those, timeless moments. I saw this, and my mind was saying, this is impossible. This is impossible when I saw him. I was seeing I couldn't understand how I could see a fully developed Bengal tiger and a young child in the same place at the same time, being the same thing, and shimmering, constantly shimmering. Male, female, I couldn't tell. Yes, totally blew me away. And then this line started coming to me, which seemed very appropriate. It said, tiger, tiger, burning bright, in the forest, in the night. And I just kept hearing the words of Blake when I was looking at Osho. That was amazing. And then a few days after that, I had my darshan. Then there was about 11 of us to go around on the back porch. And so off I went for this darshan. Well, that was another one. Because when I was called up and I sat in front of him, I couldn't keep this idiot smile off my face. I was like this. I'm not joking. And I couldn't keep the muscles down. I tried and they wouldn't move. And I thought, you must look like a fucking idiot, And I was looking at him and he's just talking, very graceful and all the rest of it, But I tell you, that was one, but what it was like when the fear was there, and I don't even know, I knew I was frightened. I thought, I was saying, you must be very, very, very frightened for you to be behaving this way, but I wasn't connecting. It's quite strange. So anyway, what it was like when I walked in, darshan, it was like, whoa, I was suddenly Daniel in the lion's den, right? And this was this big tiger, and I thought, if I can just get out the door, and I'll never come back here ever again, I'm out. And I nearly made it, metaphorically speaking, when suddenly this huge tiger paw lands on my shoulder and brings me down, right? And says, hello, Premda. I wasn't going anywhere, right? No. Oh, hello. And but the feeling was, it was like I had my head down and he had his paw on my neck like that. That's what it felt like. And he was talking to me and I'm going like this. And then he said to me, groups, and my body went. And then I heard this idiot voice say, yes, So he gave me some groups which were generally, again, they'd start off pretty cathartic, and then you'd wind up, doing like a meditation groups. And if you stayed, generally after that, you'd get into the ashram proper working. And I became a chaiwala for about 2 years, which was quite an experience. I went through a lot doing that job. But the work there was seven days a week. You never had days off. What, you're going to have a day off from meditating? You're going to have a day off from love? I mean, what are you having a day off? Right? So, and that was very intense. And I stayed with Osho in the commune situations for about 10 years. And eventually I wound up in America. And that was another can of worms, being on the ranch. It went from hippiedom to a kind of a military base overnight. It was really cute. I was watching all these guys wearing police uniforms and guns, and the last I knew of them in Pune 1, they were down at the well smoking dope, right? So now all these police officers, I thought, God, talk about transformation. I mean, what a joke. Anyway, when that all collapsed, I was very much in a persona towards the end there of kind of like the Artful Dodger, you know what I mean, in Oliver Twist. I'd kind of slipped back a bit. I'd become a bit of a wise guy. And again, I realised years later when I got to Sydney, I had this whole cathartic breakdown about it. And I felt just like a little boy who'd lost his father. And I realised that I'd had a lot of anger and stuff about the way he left. But it was all based on my expectation, you see. Che Guevara didn't run away, right? Che Guevara stayed and copped it. Why can't you? So there was these two elements in me. One, I was seeing him as a wanker, and the other was tiger, tiger, burning bright. And these things, it took me a while before that settled down. But again, it was obviously about me, my relationship to him, and what I was expecting he should be and how he should not be. And it makes me wonder, like who took sannyas from who, right? Really, I was expecting him to be a particular way, and of course he wasn't. He was always being himself. So that was a very bitter pill to swallow. And I'd wound up falling madly in love with an Australian girl. And she, when the ranch finished, came to Sydney, and I left to be with her. And when I got to Sydney, she didn't want to be with me anymore. She wanted to be back with her boyfriend. So I suddenly became, a has-been for her. But anyway, it got me to Sydney. And I was living in a house, and I started to meet all sorts of amazing people, a lot of musicians and artists and that. And I had a very wild, halcyon time in Sydney. It was absolutely marvellous. And eventually, I wound up on the far southeast coast, in a place called Bermagui, where I now live. And whilst I was living there, I got to meet the Gyalto monks of Tibet, the Yellow Hats. And when I did the chant tonight, that's where I learned it was from them. And it was the most wonderful thing ever to happen to me. There was such a big expectation. They were going to come and stay at this house with some friends of mine. And basically, we were going to be, their maitre d's. Like, you'd do the cooking and, make their beds and make sure, because they were going to be out doing their sand mandalas and that in Tilba. So I wound up basically hanging out with them a lot, driving, dropping them off and all the rest of it, and got quite close to them. But it was one of those images when I first met them that really, really blew me away. They were in this 12-seater Toyota van, and it came down at twilight. And as they stopped, there were some porch lights on, the door opened, and they came tumbling out, like these monks. And they reminded me of paratroopers, soldiers. They really did look like soldiers. And it was like, suddenly I looked up at the sky and I was seeing parachutes, with these monks like soldiers landing. And I thought, wow, what's going on? And I was looking at myself and it felt like I was brushing the dust off. And I was going, oh my God, I'm wearing the same uniform. Oh my God. And all these memories started flooding back. It was really powerful. And anyway, so I got on very well with them, and they invited me up to their monastery and to stay up there for a while. And I taught English to the young monks, but they were an experience. So I remember telling one of them, the older monk Jampatashi, that I'd gotten into a very sort of, in meditating, I was seeing things way, way back, people I'd hurt when I was 6 or 7 years old or 5. And every time I'd meditate, I'd see them, their faces of young children, that I'd bullied or hurt, and felt terrible about it, and I couldn't shake it off. So I told him about this. And Jampatashi said, okay. He said, okay. He said, and your punishment is to be happy now. I thought, wow. I mean, talk about a short circuit. He just wasn't interested in any of that. He said, okay, and your punishment is to be happy now. I got lots of little gems from them like that. They were very amazing. When I spoke about having an image, they don't really have an image. Yes, they do have an ego, a sense of identity, very much so, but none of that stuff that I was carrying or carried for years. But one thing that did come up from them, which I thought, oh, okay, it made me feel not so bad about myself. They said that one of the biggest things that they have to deal with is unworthiness, a feeling of feelings of unworth. And I always thought that was more of a Western disease, because of the Industrial Revolution and all the rest of it. I thought, that's, the alienated father, the way that we're all separated and isolated from each other, and senses of being unworthy, and the cynicism and the sarcasm, which they definitely didn't get. They didn't cop any of that, but they still told me that they had feelings that, that was one of the big stumbling blocks for their development. They said feeling unworthy. The other three, which were very powerful for me, was going mad, the fear of going mad, the fear of death, and the fear of orgasm, sexual orgasm. I didn't know that I feared orgasm, but as I began to get into my body, all these blocks were becoming apparent to me. And as I got looser, of course, making love became deeper and stronger. Not that every time I have sex, I have a full-bodied orgasm. No, no. But it was happening, and my body was getting looser, like this, getting more again into that kind of Tom Jones, huh? That's not unusual, is it? No. All right. Now, coming more into the present, where I am now, is I started work again, first time in 40 years, in a small psychiatric unit, Bega Hospital. Very small unit, 6 beds, and 3 nurses on each shift, so it's lovely. And I had trepidation. A friend said, I'm a registered nurse, said, would you come and do a casual shift at the mental health unit? And I thought, no, I don't want to be part of the thought police. I'd done heaps of that in the 70s, nah. And he said, well, just come along and give it a go. So I said, okay. And I thought, well, if it's casual shift, I get a knot in my stomach, I'm out of there, But it didn't happen. Much had changed from the days in the 70s. A lot more loving kindness and compassion, a lot more people giving and wanting the people to leave and not to stay. A lot of the times in the 70s, people did get held onto quite easily. But now they were much keener in keeping, the ball rolling, keeping people out in the community. So I didn't have any conflicts there, which really surprised me. And I enjoyed working there very much. And life seemed very sweet. For the first time, I was earning money. I hadn't touched money, for like 10 odd years in the communes. And for 8 years in Australia, I'd lived illegally. I was an illegal immigrant. I finally cleaned my act up and got all that sorted out. So life was sweet. And then I had problems urinating, and I went along and I was diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer that's now all over my bones. I was given radiation therapy before they realised it was on my bones. And it was only because of that my bladder had collapsed, and they thought I was cured, but I was taken into hospital because of a collapsed bladder. The kidneys gave up. And while I was in there, I was then told, no, you do have a terminal illness now. It's all over your bones, because it hadn't shown up in the previous. The irony of it was that had I not had that radiation and had not my bladder collapsed, I'd be dead now, because it would have gone undiagnosed. By the time it would have occurred in the body proper, it would have been way too late. I'd be gone. So now I'm on hormone therapy, which slows it down. It promotes estrogen and suppresses the testosterone, okay? So naturally, the first thing that goes is your dick. You know, I can't get it up now, and I'll talk about that later. Save the best till last. But the radiation also had done something else. It caused me to become incrementally incontinent of urine, right? So I tried, after I'd finished the treatment, went back to work, tried to make out like it wasn't happening, hoped it was going to get better, but it would just dribble. So I'd wound up using all sorts of strategies, like women's sanitary napkins, black and gold. I'd stuff them down the front of my pants, so when I got out the car and I stood up, I'd have at least a chance to get it out before I wet myself. But then I had to come up with all these strategies, right? I'd come into the car park for work, get out, know that I'd have to pee because I'd been driving 50 minutes, and then I'd get my mobile out and I'd pretend I was making a mobile call while I was actually peeing, right? So I'd be leaning on the door like this, I'd be chatting to people, and all the time I'd be peeing. So, you know, you just invent these strategies, right? And one time I was in Canberra, and I'd had a coffee in this kind of plaza area with a friend, got up to leave, goodbye. And as I stand up, I'm desperate. I really need to pee now. Like, it has to happen now, otherwise it's just going to be like that, right? And the only place I could see was a permanent concrete bin and a tree, right? So, and everyone's around. It's a busy shopping mall, right? Everyone's walking around, but I've got to do something. So I get in between the tree and the thing, and I do my routine, right? And I'm out, and I'm going, oh, hi. And then what could happen? But around the corner, a person appeared, and I tell you, this person was a nutcase, right? I could tell he was a nutcase because he had big staring eyes, he had huge hair, and he was unshaven, and his clothes were all ski whiff. They all finished here and about here. And he was about 6'2", and he was coming along like this. And I've always in my life, right, had an ability to attract mad people. If I'm on a bus and a mad person gets on, they will sit next to me. They will. They always do. It's like a magnet. And I've tried pretending I'm looking out the window. I've tried reading a book. Doesn't work. They sit next to me and say, hello. It's totally fine now. I treat it as an acting exercise. You'd say, yes, and? Yes, hold on, and we just go on from there, and it's cool. No, I'm over that sort of embarrassment. But anyway, so he's striding towards me like this, right? And I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do? 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 And then it happened. I went, fuck off! And I said it that loud, but with complete intention on him. Nobody looked around. He was walking straight at me and he went, just like that. And I thought, and I was out of there. Yeah, just these strategies and that. And eventually, of course, I had to surrender, like I say, and I wound up with a catheter, a suprapubic one. It was an external one, which is painful. Oh, guys, that's one, you know, maybe you've been through it, I don't know. But when they put that PVC pipe down the middle of your penis, go! Ah! And then the penis bleeds, so you've got this white tube and this blood dripping down the side of it. Ooh. Well, the first time, I won't go into that now. Or maybe I should. I got my finger bitten off by a dog, right? Bit of a story. I got involved in a dog fight. Shouldn't have done. This dog bit off my finger. He was trying to bite the other dog and my finger got in the way. Dung, like a chicken bone it went. I'm standing there like in this bush property and all this blood is pumping and it's blue. Can you imagine? It's going along the white bone and it's coming out so fast, it's blue. And I'm holding onto it and my God, and my finger's there and my friends are running around. And it's suddenly, I'm looking up at the sky and everyone's in slow motion and the whole sky turns into a paisley pattern and the ground starts to buck like I'm in an earthquake. But no, really, if you put me on a lie detector and I would swear to God that the ground was bucking. And then I thought, maybe I'm dying, maybe this is the death tape. And I was waiting for this sort of white circle to appear and I was going to kind of go up like, because I'd seen ghosts. I know how Kurt Russell, so anyway, it didn't happen. The people around me suddenly were running like normal speed and they said, "Are you all right, Premda, all right?" And I said, dog bit off my finger. You know, so they rushed me to the ambulance station. The poor ambulance guy, he had to drive me 50 k's to the hospital. He was very concerned about me. I didn't tell him I was a nurse, you know. And so he said, "You're right, you're right." And then he bandaged that up and he put this up on a sling and he put me in the back of the ambulance. And then this is the best bit. He got out the nitrous oxide. He said, "Do you think, are you in pain?" Now, this is a strange thing. When it got bitten, it was like an electric shock, literally an electric shock. And then afterwards, the pain was about as bad as if you banged with a hammer. You just hit it once. Oh! So that was all right. It was all doable, right? So I'm going like this. And he said, would you like some nitrous oxide? I said, "Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, you know." I said, So he gave me the mask and he then was driving. He'd radioed ahead. So the police had stopped all the traffic, right? So I'm lying and I didn't tell him I was a nurse. And I blocked up the air tube. There's a gap. There's a diaphragm at the front that goes in and out, right, as you breathe the nitrous oxide, right? But if you put your finger over it, and then I started doing dynamic, right? And you can bite off all my fingers. I don't care. You can just bite them, bite them, bite them. I just don't care. Because I just don't care about anything anymore. I love you, and I love everybody. So why the fuck should I care about getting my finger bitten off, right? So then he's driving, he leans around. He said, "You all right back there?" And I said, "I'm all right, mate." I didn't realise that the nitrous oxide would do that, right? So "I'm all right, mate." And he said, "Because if you're going through a lot of pain," he said, "I've got some morphine." Morphine. Yeah, fuck it. I didn't need the morphine, honestly. It was amazing. But that night was quite strange. Yeah. I'll just do a couple of little more heavy bits before I get back. When the finger was bitten off, I became sexually turned on. I didn't get an erection, but I had a whole flood of sexual energy around there. Now, going back to when I was 13 years old, Christmas Eve, lunchtime of all things, in the pub, massive fight, huge. You know, the police came, bottles and glasses, everyone flying everywhere. It was very exciting. I mean, I love to watch it. But my father and mother were right in the thick of it, and my mother took off her high-heeled shoe and she whacked this guy on the head so hard several times that I saw the blood go psh, psh, psh. And the same thing happened. I got sexually turned on watching it. No, really. Now, all right, I never told anyone about that, all right? I would never say anything like that in public, right? Never. I'd be too ashamed. But no, what it was, I realised it wasn't that I wanted to have sex with the dog and I didn't want to have sex with my mother, though I know Freud would have other ideas, but no, if that survival button gets pressed, that's what the body does. It goes right to the base and it just energises everything and you're prepared for anything, you know. So maybe if there's some of you who've gotten sexually turned on in the most unusual situations, I hope I've alleviated some of your guilt by sharing some of these stories, all right? I'm not a canine motherfucker, son of a bitch. No! I'm just an ordinary bloke living a life, and I just stopped to help a passerby, and look what sort of a mess it got me into. Anyway, it's another story. Yes, so, cancer, right, bummer. And of course, your sex life. I mean, that's the thing that gets really shot to pieces, right? So, the doctor was telling me, he said, you can try Viagra, which I did. I did try Viagra, which worked for a little while. Very expensive. Doctor was giving me his free samples, God bless him. That doctor gave me a hard time. So, my friend of mine, who happens to be my director, was getting them off the internet from India, all right? So, and very cheap too. But I was a bit worried, you know what I'm saying? No, not just because it was India, but anything like that can be so easily, I mean, you don't know what you're buying for a start. You don't know what they're putting in it. I mean, I could have taken the Viagra and my genitals would have exploded. I had a nice little note from Dr. Amit Singh, you know, like a nice prescription type thing. It was like, very kosher. But I imagine that, you know, just getting that sort of thing and having to complain about his Viagra, you know. But they wouldn't be interested, not after we ripped the place off for 200-300 years. They said, get fucked, you know. That's your problem, you know. Anyway, it worked and it was wonderful while it did, but then it didn't. So I went back to the doctor and I said, what else? Is there anything I can do? And he said, well, you can inject yourself. What? I said, what do you inject yourself? Yeah, to get an erection. I said, well, I mean, where do you do the injection? And he said, at the base of the penis. And I went, no, a metal needle. Oh, even though I was a nurse and I gave lots of injections, I just could not imagine impaling my poor self upon myself, one prick to another. No. And then, of course, you know, I thought, well, you know, it's bye-bye sex life. You might as well give it a go. I mean, you know. So I bought the packs, and I said to the doctor, I said, how do we do it? Do you do house calls? He said, no. He said, you have to administer it yourself. I said, oh, right, okay. So the big day finally came. I'd sabotaged about 2 or 3 dates I was going to have with my beloved because I was kind of like, no, I don't want to do it. I do not want to do it. I do not want to impale myself. No. But I thought, no, come on. You can do it. You can do it, boy. You can do it. So the big day came, right? And we decided, because it can't be spontaneous, can you? You can't just go bang, bang, and bang. You can't. So there's no point. You can't go out partying. You know, hope to pick somebody up and go round the back for a quick knee trembler. You couldn't do it in the drive. Well, you could do it in the drive-in, I guess. But you know what I'm saying. You can't imagine James Bond doing it, can you? No, excuse me, you know. No. So anyway, I thought, okay. So we know what we're doing. We can't pretend we're not knowing. So we're going to make love today. Yes, okay. So we fixed up the bedroom and made it all nice and wonderful, and the bathroom, and decided to run a hot bath. I thought, if I lie in a hot bath, you know, maybe this will be all right, you know. So Jan had her bath, and I went into the bathroom, and I get in the bath and I'm looking at the needle and that thing, oh God, oh God, oh God. So I start drinking white wine, I start smoking dope. Oh, fuck this, gin and tonic. Which didn't do any good at all because the adrenaline just blows it all away. So I was naked with it, all right? I had to bite the bullet. So I get out the bath and I start to draw up the syringe, and it's like a diabetic thing, and it's got like 5, you turn the dial, 5, 10, 15, 20, And I thought, well, how much should I use? And I thought, well, might as well get hung for a wolf as a sheep, right? So I crank it all the way to 20. And I'm sitting on the bath and I'm wearing my glasses and they're all steaming up. I'm having to take the glasses off. And the instructions are saying, don't use the needle if it's bent. Well, of course, I'm shaking like this. And I thought, I won't get the needle in. And I'm holding, and then the instructions say, one of the side effects is you may get a painful erection that lasts for days. Well, as I told you, I'm working as a registered nurse at the local hospital. And it said, if this should happen, see your GP, or if it's the weekend, which it was, go to your emergency department at your local hospital. Nah. I would go into ED, right, and it would go round the hospital like wildfire. Medical confidence, nah. They said, hey, guess what? Premda's in ED and he needs a help with a hard-on. Yeah, come on down. And they all would have casually gone and coming in and picked up the clipboard and saying, so, what's the problem? I wasn't going to allow myself. I'd rather die. I'd never live it down. Exactly. Do you want me? Now, so there I am on the bath, right, like this. And just before I come to the sacrifice, hang on a second. It reminded me, along with the incontinence, right, I was given a very super adhesive condom, which at the end, it has a tube, right? And the tube comes into the bag, which I used to have as a thigh bag there. So, right, you got it? You put the condom on, and then the tube goes in there. And the condom is super adhesive, because obviously you don't want it falling off all the time, right? So, being a nurse and all of that, I didn't read the instructions properly. And I'm like this, right? And I'm putting the condom on, right, getting it right down, right, nice and settled. Fantastic, it's on, right? And then I go to stand up, right? I can't stand up. And then the fucking mantra comes. What am I going to do? 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 For there's this black horrible moment that I'm going to be stuck there forever, right? And then, no. So I'm walking around. I'll pull it off. Pull it off, eh? So I try to pull it off. And boys, can you imagine getting your scrotum waxed? Because that's what I was doing. The only way I could get the condom off would be to pull handfuls of pubic hairs off with it, right? So what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I went to the bathroom. So I went in the bathroom, and the mirror, and there's a shelf up there. And I was feeling along for my beloved's nail scissors. And thank God, I found them. So I came back, and then I started. And as I looked at my penis, it reminded me of Gulliver's Travels. You know when the Lilliputians have nailed him all down like that, and he's and I saw my penis with all these guy ropes of pubic hair coming down around it. So I'm looking at it, I think, God! So I get the scissors, and I start macheteing all the way around, and I finally make it all the way around. And it's free at last! Lord God Almighty, Free at last. Whew. Anyway, back to the bath. Oh, I need a drink for this one. No, really at the time it would have been gin. So, I'm there, and I'm thinking, oh my God, it's come to this. I know. I said, look, old fella, we've been through a lot together, you and I. And I know that you think that me resorting to this is I don't trust you anymore. But we all need a helping hand, right? We do. Even that numb one in the Navy helped me, the dead hand. Mind you, every time I get my blood pressure done now, I get into this, oh, nurse, my fingers are going dead. You see, for me, it's foreplay. Once it's on the hard drive, forget it. So, back to this. And then I do. I say, right, all right, don't look away. Don't look at me while we're doing it. So the Cyclops, right? Boom. But bliss, it wasn't that painful. It's much more painful putting a needle in here than it is in a fleshy penis, right? That's just simply mechanics, you know. So, it was such a relief. And then, of course, it says you have to massage the area. So I get back in the bath and I'm massaging for all I'm worth. And then, after about 10 minutes, it starts to happen. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, boom, boom. Jan, get the police! Fucking hell! No, it was a bit of, I'm ready, darling. Jan comes up. Oh, right, you know. So I get out the bath, and like Muhammad Ali going up to the world champion thing, going to the bed, right? I lay on the bed, because Jan likes to be on top, not giving too much away. Jan likes to be on top, right? Jan likes to be on top, which is fair enough. But it was kind of like this, you know, it was doing this. That was all right, any port in a storm, right? Beggars can't be choosers, I thought. If there isn't any more, then there's deeper, you know, compensation. Anyway, so, okay, so our bed's quite high. So when we'd finished, I jumped off, and as I jumped off, it was like, whoo! Because I don't know what happened, but the penis went, for some reason, you know, got this boom, you know. Great! So we did it some more, but this time standing up, you know. But anyway, I'm just saying, when all appears to be lost, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, just as long as it's not some poor sod coming in the opposite direction with the torch. It does happen. Yes, so I feel very blessed in that regard, that, you know, where all these things that seem to be taking away from me, even, you know, my body, of course, you know, and but, you know, I did, about the pain of leaving, I can't say I'm over that. I don't know if I'll ever be over that, not so long as I'm drawing breath. And it really did come down to one person. It was my beloved. It was like a sharp pain, the separation. So that is something, yes, that's here. But apart from that, I feel, yes, that when things do disappear, more emerges that I could never suspect or even begin to guess was there, just hidden, just the shadow behind something. So I feel my life is blessed that this has happened. Yes, they tell me I've got 6 months to live. I did have an energy healing session with a very wonderful man called Kurt Peterson. I was very, very wary about things like that. But I just would like to acknowledge him because even if, I'm not around in 6 months, I know the quality of my life was greatly improved by that session. So yes, I can't say that I'm, come to some acceptance about my death. I mean, I've never really understood that, because I always feel that death is somebody else's business, it's not mine. It's something that, of course I know about the bardos and the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and I've taken ayahuasca and I've been to other dimensions and so on. But, I mean, in truth, I don't know. I don't know what will happen. I know that in the beginning of my journey, I was a stranger to myself, and now that strangeness has turned into a mystery. And now I'm not a stranger to myself, I'm simply a mystery. And I don't have a clue who I am, and I know I never will. It's just simply not possible. But I am enjoying this, and I must say, to come back to the top of the show, when I came in and I just saw you guys all congregating and talking, I really didn't want to start the show. I didn't. I just kept moving down. I thought, no, I don't want to burst the bubble. This is fantastic. I thought, they're all getting together, they're all chatting and raving on and having a great old time, and all this sort of unity is happening. And this is basically all I've been trying to do tonight, right? And it happened right at the top of the show. So, all right. I don't know how your bladders are doing. I don't have one, so I can't gauge. But I might be getting close. So I may close now. Is that okay? Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you.
Boo.